Hello Booktube, it's Mike and this is Riff Raff's Reading Renaissance. Today I want to do a tag. It's the My 10 Biggest Books Tag, which was originally created by Alan from Hard Books and I was tagged by Gareth from Books, Songs and Other Magic. But before I do the tag tonight, I have a very important public service announcement. I know there are many of you on my channel who've been suffering the slings and arrows of outrageous squeaking from my armchair. Listen carefully. Can you hear absolutely nothing? Absolutely nothing. This is the point in the program where I intend to do a little bit of product placement. There are three things that South Africa can truly claim to be the best in the world at. The one is rugby. The second is Mrs. Ball's peach chutney. And if you haven't experienced Mrs. Ball's peach chutney, you haven't experienced life. But the third one, and perhaps the most important as far as this channel is concerned, is this lubricant called Q20. This product is the sole reason that the squeaking chair has ceased squeaking. Now, I'm not being paid for those endorsements, but I can tell you as a proud South African, those three products are simply unbeatable. Okay, meanwhile, back at the tag. Today I want to talk about the biggest books. This is the tag that Alan created. It's not about chunkers. We've had one before where we talk about the biggest books in terms of number of pages. This one's a physical exercise. This is simply the books with the largest dimensions that you have. And you'll see this gargantuan pile over my shoulder here, which is my selection from my library of the 10 biggest books I have. So without further ado, let's dive into them. The first one, oh my goodness, it's really huge. To give you an idea, and with a shout out to Mark at Book Time with Elvis, because this is his favorite book, Three Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome. But the reason I've got it in here today is it's a standard small paperback. So I'll just put it there to give you an idea of scale. Okay, this is a massive book. It's very, very, very heavy. It's 655 pages, and it is the complete cartoons of The New Yorker. It covers the period from 1925 up to 2004, and inside the cover, as you can see, there are CDs in which every single cartoon issued are recorded on those CDs, so you can look them up and they're cross-indexed. It's a massive book of cartoons. I did do a video for Framed in September where I talked about cartooning, and in fact, if you want to look up more cartoons from this book, I covered it quite extensively in that, and you can see that video here, if I've got that right. But I will just pause in the spirit of Moby Dick, which is a video I did very early on in my time here, and that one you can see there. But I couldn't resist showing you, if I can do it without breaking my arm, the cartoon here of Moby Dick. And the caption reads, "Now that I've wiped him out, I kind of miss that little peg-legged bastard." So that's the spirit of the cartoons in this book. It is the sort of definitive coffee table book because you'd need a good strong coffee table to cope. It's massive, absolutely massive. So let me put it safely over here and tackle the next book in the series. Note the lack of squeaking, guys. It's just like, it's the sounds of silence. Unbelievable. The next book up is an equally big, heavy book called The Travel Book, A Journey Through Every Country in the World. And it literally is what it says on the cover. Again, I'll give you the little scale comparison. There's Mark's favorite little paperback book. So you can see the relative size of this thing. It is vast. This is 444 pages, and every double page is a country. So I've opened at Niger by complete random. But if I do slightly less random, let me, as I'm struggling to cope with the sheer scale of the thing, if I pull open the page, the entry for South Africa, we can have a little look at what each country has got. There's obviously a large picture, very reminiscent of the country. Here you've got baobab trees and rhinos, and you'll see below there are picturesque and typical images that one associates with South Africa. And then on the side here, there's a standard set of questions or information for each country that you turn to. Things like best time to visit, the essential experiences, getting under the skin, what to read, what to listen to, what to watch, as in movies about, what to eat. Of course, in South Africa, it's a braai, but I'm sure you all know that. What to drink. Each country, they select one word that captures the country. For South Africa, it's how's it? And trademarks and surprises. And then there's a little map down in the corner showing you the layout of the country. So again, if as a lot of my listeners are in the States, let's have a little look at the page on the United States. Again, you'll see a beautiful picture, the large picture of Yosemite, and then smaller pictures representing all aspects, as much as one can, in 6 pictures of American life, including a nice little blues man in the top right corner there from Chicago. And if it says best time to visit, March to July, essential experiences, Californian beaches, camping the Great American West, pounding the pavements in New York, touring mysterious Anasazi Indian ruins in southwestern deserts, crunching New England leaves in autumn, cruising the neon madness of the Las Vegas Strip, enjoying live music festivals in Austin, Memphis, New Orleans, or Seattle. I have to say, that makes it sound like quite a nice trip. Getting under the skin, they say read Jack Kerouac's On the Road, Don DeLure's Underworld, listen to Johnny Cash's American recordings, that I must endorse, they're fantastic, and James Brown's Greatest Hits as the godfather of soul. That's pretty good recommendations. Watch the movie Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather trilogy, Sam Mendes' American Beauty. Eat steak and potatoes, T-bones or ribeyes, vegetarian burritos, pizza, deep dish or thin crust. Can't be hungry after that meal, surely. And in a word, thank you, come again. Yeah, so it goes on and on. I could show you more. Perhaps I'll just flip to the Netherlands, because the Netherlands is where I spent a few years of my life living and working. Again, a very typical sort of set out of pictures showing some of the images that are very typical. You see the tulips at the bottom, predictably, and the windmill. It has exactly the same things. Under what to read, it's the Diary of Anne Frank. You can't argue with that. Under what to listen to, it's Tiesto, the indisputed trance meister. If you don't know who that is, join the club, but we're showing our age. And so on and so on. So 444 pages. It's not the definitive reference work for any particular country, but I must admit I find it a comforting book when one wants to feel like a citizen of the planet, where you want to be reminded that we are all together citizens of the planet, and the borders we draw between countries are in many cases simply arbitrary, and there's humans on both sides of the border. And if you want to feel a little bit like you're part of a bigger whole, this is a lovely book to do that for you. Let me, without damage, let me put it back in its place. There. And we can move on to the next book. The next one on the list is another exciting book, and no less of a massive tome. This one's called The Earth from the Air. It's huge, again, courtesy of 3 Men in a Boat. There's the scale to the little paperback. It is a series of photographs by a French photographer, Jan Arthus Bertrand, who spent 5 years flying all over the different continents and taking a series of very artistic pictures. Let me make sure there's no light reflections there. It is both an artistic joy. There are really some spectacular photographs of parts of the world that one can only appreciate from a sort of a low aerial perspective. But it is also a bit of a serious call to action in terms of understanding the impact that we humans have on our Earth. There's another stunning picture. That's the Jarrah region in Kuwait. It just goes on and on and on. Stunning, stunning, stunning aerial photographs. Perspectives that one would not otherwise see. It's described on the back cover as a dazzling portrait of our planet. And again, this is a book that gives me joy in the same spirit as the previous one, when one wants to feel part of a bigger whole. But it does have a serious side. It talks about the human impact and how our activities modify the environment, deforestation, agricultural issues, the impact of urban sprawl, changes of coastlines, etc. So there's a serious side to it, but it is just a thing of artistic beauty. I can't resist continually showing you more and more images, and there's 414 pages of the book, so it's an absolute joy. I'm going to try and be brave and reach back here and try not to give myself a hernia or a slip disc as I do that, which I seem to have got right. The next book on the list is the Natural History book. This is from Dorling Kindersley, and Dorling Kindersley is just a exquisite range of book. It's a publisher of exquisite books on a whole range of subjects, but this one is divided into 6 categories. You can see from the cover a little bit of the idea. It's basically a picture book. If you want to know about mushrooms, here's chapter and verse on mushrooms. And if you're a visual person like I am, it's a very attractive thing. If you want to look at shells and sea life, it's here. There are 6 chapters, and they run along living earth, minerals, rocks and fossils, microscopic life, plants, fungi and animals. So if we flick to animals, here's opossums. I'm not sure I knew there were that many variations, but maybe that's the point of the book. It's to create, here's wild monkeys. It's just an absolutely stunningly beautiful book if one wants to understand and experience more of the planet than perhaps one can in one's normal daily life. Weasels and their relatives, look how many variations. It's just incredibly beautifully done. It's another one of these heavy books that needs a sturdy coffee table and can give you a lot of hours of reference joy. So that's the Natural History book. I'm going to pop that up there for safekeeping. And my next choice is a little bit more serious. Coming from South Africa, it's not surprising. This rather large book is called The Legacy of Apartheid. And it's basically what it says on the cover. In 1948, on the day South Africa first elected a national party government, The Guardian commented, "A national victory today would be a disaster. Dr. Malan has chosen, for what seemed no doubt strong electoral reasons, to fight on the worst possible field, racialism." You know the story, but what this is actually quite a detailed book in terms of both the story as told in current news cuttings. You'll see there, if I get in close, there's Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher weighing in on the headline says Kodak to shut down operations in South Africa. I remember when that happened. There are dramatic photojournalistic pictures of events that became landmarks in the story of apartheid. There are early pictures of Nelson Mandela there on the left. There's an interesting picture of Winnie Mandela under house arrest at her home in Brantford. There's a lot of journalistic record of various events along the troubled journey of story, including this rather poignant depiction of a black domestic wheeling two little white kids in a white residential area. This was the surface view of a society that could never survive under a premise without a moral basis. But it's an interesting book, and I think as exactly the title of the book says, The Legacy of Apartheid. It contains documents relating to the laws, the institutions, the ideology. It explains how the state enforced racial segregation and the inequalities. It's published by the Guardian newspaper, and I think a lot of it has drawn heavily from their news archives. It's not a fun book, but it's an extremely good legacy record for someone who is not familiar necessarily with all the detail of the story and wants to find a manageable record, both in terms of words and images and pictures of documents, etc. So highly recommended to anyone who wants to understand that story better. And then perhaps on a slightly more cheerful note, the next book I want to pull out of the pile is called The Illustrated Encyclopedia of Music. Gosh, these books are heavy. This one's 448 pages, but again, just to reference it against Mark's paperback, it is... it's a big boy. It's heavy, heavy, heavy. But what I particularly like about this, I mean, behind me in these shelves, I have hundreds of books on music. But what I think made this one special for me is I came to it early in my music understanding, and it actually has chapters on the different genres of music. Now, genres of music is a controversial thing as to where one genre starts and where another one stops. And that can be debated endlessly. But for someone like me who was a serious music collector, I found this book an enormously helpful reference work. This contents page is too detailed for you to see, but if I just flash it up to you up front and then tell you that for each little picture box you're seeing there, they are dividing. The first chapter is on pop, then rock, then jazz, then blues, country, folk, classical, world, dance, hip-hop, reggae, soul and R&B, gospel, electronic, soundtracks and theatre, and then what they call popular and novelty. But I mean, again, if I work within just the pop one, pop is then broken down into 50s pop, rock and roll, rockabilly, doo-wop, skiffle, 60s pop, wall of sound, 60s pop singer-songwriter, British invasion, surf music, Mersey beat, mod, 70s pop, Euro pop, 80s pop, new wave, two-tone. It goes on and on and on. Half my audience has fallen asleep. But if you are at all interested in understanding how music is broken up and categorized, it's quite a manageable book. There's a page or two on classical with our friend Bach proudly smiling out from the page. There's one on UK folk and the photo of Bert Jansch, who's one of my real folk heroes. If you haven't heard Bert Jansch, look him up. He's fantastic. And just to be equal opportunity, there's alternative country with Townes Van Zandt playing the guitar. He's probably one of the greatest songwriters ever to come out of the States. And so it goes on. Fusion and jazz rock with Miles Davis's amazing iconic album, Bitches Brew. So there's something in it for everybody. And I loved it because I found it really helpful to be given a categorization of music simply as a land map so that I could work my way through, because there's a lot of different types of music and it's fine to debate where the boundaries are, but before you get there you need some sort of path to find your way through. And this, I think, is probably the best book I've found in terms of trying to say, okay, if you want to get your head around what music is out there, this is where you start. All 448 pages of it. It's a huge tome, but I think it's well worth the effort. Next up, still on the subject of music and no less heavy, is this book called Endless Trip. Now, this one is, how many pages? This is 773 pages. My goodness. I need to hold this close so you can actually get a sense of the cover, because it's one of those beautiful books where the cover is made up of album covers. And if I read exactly what it is, it says, the fullest study of the 60s and 70s US and Canadian music scene ever, covering pop, rock, psych, prog, folk, blues, and beyond. And it really is that. I mean, I see, just looking on the front cover, I see the Doors, I see Buffalo Springfield, I see Neil Young. And as I flip through it, you will see that it is literally an A to Z reference of the music that was released during those 60s and 70s periods. So again, it's a bit of a reference book rather than a start to finish read, but it's one where you can just endlessly dip in and find what you need in one single volume, albeit a very heavy volume. So I'll pass that over to the pile and we'll move on to the next book, which is another one of these Dorling Kindersley's. I must say I do adore the Dorling Kindersley series. They just never seem to go wrong with the books they choose. This one is history, but what I love about this is it's history year by year. One of the biggest challenges for me, who never studied history formally, but as I get older, I've got more and more interested in it and what it can teach us and the importance of not repeating the same mistakes we've made before, is to understand relative history. You know, where was ancient Greece while something was happening somewhere in China? You know, that kind of relationship, which is not always obvious in history books. Most history books tend to pick a subject, an area, and focus. This book literally starts many years BC. I think 6.5 million years BC, to be honest. But the whole book, if I show you carefully, you can see the black dates across the top. They literally tell you the time zone that we're in, and that time zone advances chronologically through the whole book. So if I open randomly at another page, we've advanced to the middle of the 1600s. And what's beautiful is at the bottom of the page, there's a timeline of significant events. So you can see precisely when something happened, and when Oliver Cromwell was doing his thing in England, what was happening over at the Taj Mahal, for example, in India. I mean, that kind of cross-referencing and putting into context global history, to me, is priceless. And to have that all available in one beautifully presented book, again, it's not the definitive work. It's not, David Murphy would probably not enjoy this because it's too shallow. But for those of us who are just armchair historians or in history enthusiasms, it's great to be able to dip into it. Here's a couple of pages on the Great War. It's just an absolute joy as a reference work when you want to try and understand how the pieces all fit together. Having got my head round the history of the world since ancient times, my own lifetime, of course, was largely lived in the 20th century. And therefore my next book, which is even heavier, because this one, believe it or not, is 1,500 pages. But this, and again, it's another Dorling Kindersley book, but it's called Millennium, and it is the 20th century from the 1st of January 1900 through to the very last day of the 20th century, which they count as the end of 1999. And when you open it up, you will literally get a date. This first one we've opened at is June of 1914, and you can see exactly what's going on in a sort of newspaper reporting style. If I jump forward to something a little bit more like the duration of my lifetime, if we get into here, for example, I see in 1967, there's a reference to the story about astronauts. Donald Campbell dies when his bluebird somersaults at 300 miles per hour. Those aren't particularly cheerful ones to pick on. But of course, literally it goes through all the ages, and this is a really heavy book. This really does need to be put down. 1985, there's Mikhail and Reza Gorbachev. Appointed as the new Soviet leaders at a turning point. There's a young Salman Rushdie. So it's all here, and I have to say, for someone who lived the bulk of their life in the 20th century, this was irresistible. To be able to go back and put into context all the major events. If I simply show you the cover close-up, you will see significant events there. Mandela and de Klerk at the bottom, that of course is very personal to me. Charles and Diana above, the landing on the moon, the famous photograph of the kids suffering from horrendous Agent Orange bombings, and the nuclear blasts. It was a busy century. But 20th century day by day, wow. It covers more than just history. I'm not going to try and reach that one. I'm going to put it down there because otherwise we could have a serious problem back here. It covers developments and discoveries and science and culture, and it's literally like a newspaper, but it's day by day through the whole of the 20th century, which is quite a publishing feat. And last but not least, I've saved a funny one for last, and this is another heavy book. This one is 354 pages. That doesn't seem so impressive, but boy, it's heavy. And this is The Python's Autobiography of the Pythons. Now, to the uninitiated, that's Monty Python, the comedy group who started up in the sort of 1960s. And if you want to get an idea for what you're in for, there's the opening inside of the book. But it is in fact a book that was issued for the 35th anniversary of the Python's Flying Circus. And there's the emblem that any of you who know the Flying Circus will recognize, the foot on the TV. And basically, the book is broken up into chapters, as you can see here, if I get that into frame, which covers the period before Monty Python, the formation of the actual Monty Python group, the TV years when they were making the Flying Circus, the films, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, The Life of Brian and the Meaning of Life, and then what they all did after Python, where Cleese went on to do Fawlty Towers and A Fish Called Wanda. Terry Gilliam started directing impossibly complicated films. Eric Idle did stage and huge success with musicals, including Spamalot. And Terry Jones wrote history books and children's books. And Michael Palin did a whole series of documentaries on travel. It also references the other member of the group, Graham Chapman, who died in 1989. What is fascinating, there's sort of pictures from the series that anyone who's seen the series will immediately know and love. But beneath the funny stuff, there is actually quite a serious discussion amongst the individual Pythons about the dynamic tension that existed within this group, and because they weren't always on good terms. There were partnerships within the group. John Cleese and Graham Chapman were a writing partnership, and Terry Jones and Michael Palin were a writing partnership, and Eric Idle tended to do his own thing on the side. And there was some competition between those groups. So there was often tension about whose pieces were the funniest and what should be cut, etc. But the belief from all of them is that tension is actually what drove the insanity that was Monty Python, and that broke the barriers of comedy to give us the legacy that they did. So, as an unabashed Monty Python fan, I love the book, and I love going back and dipping into it periodically, as long as I've got a strong coffee table to put it on. So, that was 10 books, 10 very heavy books, and I'm not going to try and do one of those piles where I do here, because then we really would have an accident. But anyway, I hope that was a fun ramble, and thank you to Alan for originating the tag, and thank you to Gareth for tagging me. If you haven't been tagged, because I'm sure, as always, I'm a little bit slow to doing the tags. If you haven't been tagged, please consider yourself tagged personally by me, because I think it's a fun, different look at books, slightly different from perhaps how we normally look at books on BookTube, but it was a lot of fun to do. So thanks very much, and I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please can you do the normal like and subscribe stuff to make everybody happy? And in any event, I'll hope to see you next time. Thank you, BookTube. Bye-bye now.